Heavenly Father, we ask that the meditation of our heart and the words of our mouth may be acceptable in your sight.
亲爱的主耶稣，我愿我们心里所想、口里所说的都蒙你的悦纳，奉主耶稣基督的名。
We ask that your word may have a free reign in our hearts and minds.
然后我们求你使我们的这个话在我们的心里都有作用，
Pulling down strongholds and casting down arguments that are contrary to your will.
让我们能够合理与这个你所讲的，我们所行的、所做的都符合你的心意。
We ask this in Jesus' name.
我们以上的祷告是奉主耶稣基督的名。
Amen. The other day, after I'd gone to bed, I couldn't sleep.
有一天晚上，我躺在床上，我睡不着觉，
So I played around on Facebook
所以我就在玩这个脸书，
and I posted something on Facebook.
然后我就在脸书上呢发了一些东西，
Now within a minute,
就差不多在1分钟之内啊，
I had a response from a friend in Hong Kong
我就有一个从香港的朋友，他有一个回应，
and another one in Holland.
然后另外一个在荷兰的朋友也有一个回应，
You know, it's amazing what this little phone can do.
就很奇妙，这么一个小小的手机能做的这个事儿啊，
It can bridge distances all over the world in seconds.
它能够把这个全世界呢在分秒之间都连接起来，
And you can communicate with friends all over the world in real time.
你可以和世界各地的朋友们即时通讯。
Now most people take that for granted, don't they?
绝大多数人都觉得这是理所当然的一个事儿，对不对？
We think it's normal.
我们觉得这是一个很正常的事儿。
You see, I still marvel at the technological progress that I've seen in my life.
我现在仍然对我这个时代的这个科技的进步呢感到很惊奇。
When I was a little tot, we didn't have TV.
当我还是很小的一个小孩的时候呢，我们连电视都没有。
In my place, we didn't have a car or a telephone.
然后我住的地方呢，也没有这个汽车和这个电话。
But nowadays, we've got all these technological things.
但是现在呢，我们有了所有的这些科技上的东西，
And we're so used to that.
然后我们已经对这个东西习惯了，
And we think that we can do everything.
然后我们觉得可以用这个科技呢做任何事儿。
Nothing can stop our technological progress.
没有什么能够阻止科技的进步，
But reality is different.
但是现实呢又是不同的。
We still have very human problems that we find hard to overcome.
然后我们仍然还是有人的这个问题呢，我们是难以克服的。
Problems that are very human.
是很人性化的东西，人的问题。
Who remembers Barnaby Jones?
谁记得这个
Barnaby.
巴比琼斯？
He was the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia.
他是他是之前的一个总理。
Anybody remember what he did?
那边有一个。
Well, he committed adultery.
他行淫。
You see, these problems are already spoken of in the Bible.
但是这些问题呢，已经在圣经里面提到了
Human problems.
人的问题。
And so this text that we are talking about today is a very hot one.
所以今天我们在这个经文里提到这个问题呢，是很烫手的一个问题。
Many commentators and even scriptures don't think that this belongs in this place.
很多的这个评论家就觉得这个经文不应该是出现在这个福音书里边。
I don't know about your Bible. Does John 8 come at John 8, verse 1 in the Bible, in your Bibles?
我不知道你的这个圣经啊，但是这个是在约翰福音的第8章里面。
People are not sure where it belongs.
有些人呢就不知道是不是应该把它放在这里。
And some Bibles put it at the end of the Gospel of John.
但是有些这个圣经版本就把它放到这个约翰福音的最后。
Now the difficulty is that they're not quite sure where it belongs, but they say it is a passage that happened in the life of Jesus.
但问题就是呢，这个确实是发生在这个耶稣所行的事工里边的一个事件。
Now the difficulty is related to the fact that when you read it at first, it seems that Jesus is closing his eyes on a clear instance of adultery.
这个问题在哪儿？就是在你第一次看这个经文的时候，你感觉主耶稣对这个行淫的这个事件呢是视而不见。
And so in order to not give that impression, they rather leave the passage out.
就为了不给大家这样的印象呢，他们就宁愿把这个舍掉。
But we know from the rest of Scripture that Jesus does not approve of adultery.
但是从后面的经文我们又读到，耶稣呢是不认可行淫的。
In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart.
在登山宝训的时候呢，主耶稣就曾经讲过说，凡看见妇女就动淫念的，这人心里已经与他犯奸淫了。
So Jesus wasn't saying that adultery is okay.
耶稣没有说过这个行淫是可以的。
So what is happening in this passage?
但是在这个经文里面是发生了什么事儿呢？
What is it all about?
这个是到底怎么一回事儿呢？
Well, it's a test case.
这其实是一个试验的一个事件，
It's a bit of a lawyer's picnic.
这是律师们最喜欢干的事儿。
You know, when you get lawyers involved, it always costs.
当你有这个律师卷进来的时候，全都是钱的问题。
So some of the religious leaders of his day brought along a woman who was caught in the very act of adultery.
那个时候呢，就有一些宗教的领袖呢，就把一个正在行淫时被抓的妇人呢带到主人面前。
It was a perfect test case.
这是一个很完美的一个试验的案件。
How would Jesus respond?
耶稣要怎么来回应呢？
Well, these scribes and Pharisees, they really thought that they had Jesus in a corner.
这些文士和法利赛人呢，就已经把这个耶稣逼到一个死角。
And the question they ask is a very loaded one.
然后他们问耶稣的这个问题呢是很沉重的。
They said, Now Moses in the law commanded us that such a one should be stoned. But what do you say?
他们说，摩西的律法告诉我们，行这样事的人要被处死。你是怎么样认为的呢？
So they say, What do you say, teacher?
说你是怎么认为的呢，夫子？
And so what they were trying to do was to find something with which they could accuse him.
他们试图要做的就是找到一些事情来指控耶稣。
Israel in those days was under Roman law.
那个时候的这个耶路撒冷呢是在罗马的律法之下的。
And the Jews did not have the authority or the right to put anyone to death.
犹太人呢是没有任何的权利让别人死或者判别人死刑。
So if Jesus said, stone her,
那如果耶稣说用石头打他，
they could go to the Roman authorities and said, he's breaking the law.
他们就会跑到罗马当局去指控说，你看这个人说用石头打人，
Because that was contrary to Roman law.
这和罗马的律法是不相符的。
But on the other side,
但是另一方面呢，
if he said, do not stone her,
如果他说不要用石头打他，
they would say, see, you don't believe in the law of Moses.
他们就会说，哎，你看你不相信这个摩西的律法，
So they had him in a difficult position, didn't they?
他们就把耶稣放到了一个很困难的境地里边，是不是呢？
And they were trying to find out whether the teaching of Jesus was in line with the law of Moses.
他们在试图去判定这个耶稣的教导和摩西的律法是不是相符的。
Now the Pharisees believed that Jesus couldn't be the promised Messiah.
这个法利赛人是不相信耶稣是这个命定的弥赛亚救世主的，
Because he came from Galilee.
因为他是从加利利来的，
And so they thought they could catch him out with this test case.
所以他们就觉得他们应该能够让他显露原形，用这个事件。
Because in their thinking, the promised Messiah would not teach anything contrary to the law of Moses.
因为他们相信这个应许的弥赛亚是不会和这个摩西的律法有相反的教导的。
So it's interesting to see what Jesus does.
所以呢，这个耶稣有什么样的反应是很有意思的。
But at first, he ignores them.
一开始呢，他完全就无视他们。
When the story begins, we see that Jesus is teaching the people. He's sitting down. No, I'm not going to sit down because then he would have to get me up.
在一开始的时候呢，这个耶稣是坐在地上教训人的。
It says he sat down and taught them. He sat down
他
and
坐下来教训人，
so he was sitting down.
他是坐着的。
I'm not quite sure, Pastor, whether there would be chairs at that stage in the outer court.
我不太确定那个时候这个会堂外面有没有椅子啊？
But when I see pictures, I don't see chairs around there.
当我看那个图画的时候，我是没有看到椅子的。
So I think he was sitting on the floor.
我想他应该是坐在地上的。
And then in the midst, when he was teaching, these scribes and these Pharisees come in.
所以当他正在教训人的时候，这个文士和法利赛人呢就进来了。
And they dragged this poor woman right in the middle.
他们把这个可怜的这个妇人呢就扔到中间。
And they told Jesus, they found her in the very act of adultery.
他们就告诉耶稣说，他是在行淫的时候被抓的。
Now at this time, Jesus really should have stood up.
那这个时候，耶稣是不是应该已经要起来了呢？
But that's not what he does.
但是他没有这么做，
He ignores them.
他完全忽视了他们。
And instead, he writes on the floor.
相反呢，他就弯着腰在地上画字儿。
Now notice he doesn't, we're not told what he wrote.
我们不知道他到底是写了什么。
Now, many years ago, I had the privilege of attending an Aboriginal Christian gathering.
很多年前呢，我有幸参加了一个这个土著基督徒的聚会，
It was at Mount Margaret in the desert northeast of Kalgoorlie.
是在这个卡布里东北方向的一个叫玛格丽特山的沙漠里。
And during a break in the meeting, we were introduced to an Aboriginal who had come out of the desert.
在聚会休息的时候呢，我们被介绍给一个从这个沙漠里来的土著人，
And he explained through an interpreter where he had come from in the desert.
他是透过一个翻译来给我们讲他是从这个沙漠哪里来的。
And he drew pictures in the sand,
他在这个沙地上呢是画这个图画，
mountains and trees and
有山啊、树啊。
And so he told us how we could get to the place where he came from.
他告诉我们怎么样才能够去到他来的那个地方。
And after he'd done that, he gently wiped his hand over the sand and the picture was gone.
他做完这些事儿之后呢，他就轻轻地把这个沙子上的这些画都抹掉了。
And apparently this is a normal practice.
这对他来说可能就是一个平常就会做的事儿。
So when I was reading this passage, I was reminded of that event.
当我读到这个经文的时候，我就让我想起来那段的记忆。
You see, twice in this passage, Jesus stoops down and writes something on the ground with his finger.
在这段经文里面两次提到主耶稣弯下腰在地上画字。
And I think it's the only time in the Gospels or in the New Testament that Jesus is said to write.
这可能是圣经里唯一的一次记载，说耶稣弯下腰来在地上写字。
So I think it's a special occasion.
这是一个很特殊的事件。
He's saying something by doing that.
然后他是想透过这个事情、这个动作来说明一些东西。
Now at first he ignores the accusers of the woman.
一开始呢，他就是完全无视了这些指控者，
And he didn't answer them for quite a while.
他很长时间都对他没有回应，
But they keep on insisting.
他们就一直不断的在问，不断的在问，
Give us a ruling.
告诉我们要怎么做。
And then finally he raises himself up and says, and then he says something very important.
后来呢，他就直起身来，然后说了一个很重要的一句话。
In verse 7,
在第7节，
he who is without sin among you, cast the first stone.
你们当中谁是没有罪的，可以先向他扔石头。
A brilliant answer.
非常棒的回答。
You know, it just unraveled the whole plot that these guys had.
他把这个阴谋啊，就彻底的粉碎了。
Let us see why this is so.
让我们来看看为什么是这样的。
First of all, the teaching of the Old Testament.
所以，首先这个旧约里面的教导是什么样呢？
In Leviticus in chapter 20 and verse 10, it tells us that adulterers should be put to death.
在利未记的20章10节是这样说的：与邻舍之妻行淫的奸夫淫妇都必致死。
It says there, the man who commits adultery with another man's wife, he who commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death.
刚才我已经把这个看了，与邻舍之妻行淫的奸夫淫妇都必致死。
Now, you've probably noticed that there is only the woman who is accused here.
大家可能注意到了，在这儿呢，只有这个行淫的妇人被指控，
The man who was involved apparently got away.
然后这个另外一面的那个男人呢，可能就已经逃脱了。
It shows some of the hypocrisy of the accusers.
这就说明了一方面是什么呢？这个指控者的虚伪的一面。
The other passage that we need to look at in the Old Testament is Deuteronomy 22, verse 22.
另外一个信息经文在申命记的22章22节，
It says that if a man is found lying with a woman married to a husband, then both of them shall die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. So you should put away the evil person from Israel.
22节是这样说的：如果有人与有夫之妇通奸，必须处死奸夫和淫妇，这样就从以色列除掉了罪恶。
So the teaching from the Old Testament seems to be very clear.
旧约里面的教导在这里是非常清楚的，
Adultery was not to be tolerated
行淫是不能容忍的，
and was to be punished
而且是必须受到惩罚，
with death.
死刑。
But in his writing on the ground, Jesus seems to make a reference, I think a link to the Old Testament.
但是透过这个在地上写字，主耶稣好像是在做一个引向了这个旧约里面。
I presume that the outer court was paved.
我想这个会堂外边这个地应该是被铺过的。
And we know from the Old Testament that God wrote 2 stones with the 10 Commandments with his finger.
我们知道在旧约里边，这个神呢是用手指在这个石块上写的十诫。
And so by writing on the ground, Jesus was saying something about his own teaching.
所以在地上写字呢，主耶稣是想说他自己的一些教导。
So there's a special emphasis here.
这里有一个特别的一个引用，一个比喻，
It doesn't say what he wrote,
但是没有说他到底是写了什么。
but it's clear that there's some special emphasis here.
但是这里很明显有一个特别的比喻。
And I think what it means is that the old way is now replaced with something much better.
但是重要的是什么呢？就是说旧的这个方式已经被新的更好的取代了。
You see, the Bible talks about 2 covenants,
圣经里面提到了2个约，
the old and the new covenant.
旧的和新的约，
And they refer to 2 ways of dealing, or 2 stages in God's dealing with people.
这就指向了就是神和人在交流接触的时候2个不同的这个方式。
In the first covenant, man is told what to do.
第一个约里边，人被告诉要怎么做，
He's to show his love for God by obeying the commandments.
要透过遵守神的律法来显示对神的爱。
But in the second covenant, it's not so much of what we do, but what God does.
第2个约里面呢，就不是关于我们要怎么做，而是神要为我们做什么。
In the Old Covenant, we have the law of Moses, and under that law, we are all proven to be sinners.
在旧的约里面，我们有摩西的律法，而这个律法呢是告诉我们我们是有罪的。
Under the Old Covenant, we find that we are all sinners. We are not righteous.
在旧的约里边，我们知道我们都是罪人，我们不是公义的，
We come short of the glory of God.
我们缺了神的荣耀。
And we find that we cannot obey the law perfectly.
我们发现我们就不能够完美的去遵守神的律法。
But now, in the New Testament, we see a different picture.
但是在新约里面，我们就看到了一个不一样的画面。
We see Jesus,
我们看到了耶稣，
who by his perfect obedience has fulfilled all the requirements of the law for us.
他透过完美的遵守这些律法呢，来实现了我们。
And the new covenant points to Jesus, our perfect righteousness.
所以这个新约是指向了耶稣我们完美的这个公义。
You know, I wonder sometimes what Moses must have thought
就我就在想啊，那个摩西那个时候在想什么呢？
when he carried those 2 bits of stone down the mountain.
当他扛着那2块大石头从山上下来的时候，他在想什么呢？
You see, one of the commandments on those stones said, "You shall not commit murder."
十诫当中的一诫呢，就是说你不可杀人。
And Moses himself was guilty of that crime.
摩西本人呢，就是犯了这条罪的。
He was a lawbreaker and he deserved death.
他是一个犯了罪的人，他是应该受到死刑的惩罚的。
And so what we find is that the law condemns us and finds us guilty.
所以我们就发现呢，这个律法呢是定我们的罪的，来判我们死的。
And the ministry of the law brought death.
所以这个律法的施工带来了什么呢？死。
So how do you and I know that we are sinners?
我们是怎么知道我们是罪人呢？
We read the 10 Commandments
我们来读十诫，
and we quickly find that we haven't fulfilled all God's law.
然后我们很快就发现我们没有完全的达到神的这个要求。
And we also find out that because we are sinners, we are guilty and can be punished with death.
然后我们同时也发现呢，我们是有罪的，也有可能是因为这个罪被判死。
And so the law reflects a righteous and holy God.
所以这个律法呢，就反映了这个神的公义和荣耀。
But the new covenant gives us life in the Holy Spirit.
但是新的这个约呢，给了我们圣灵里边新的生命。
Just turn with me to 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 5 and 6.
然后我们一起来看哥林多后书的第2章。
2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 5 and 6.
第3章5到6节。
Paul writes this there. He said, "Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think of anything as being from ourselves, but our sufficiency is from God, who also made us sufficient as ministers of the new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life."
哥林多后书的3章5到6节是这样说的，并不是我们凭自己能承担什么事，我们所能承担的乃是出于神，他叫我们能承担这新约的职事，不是凭着自举，乃是凭着经义，因为那自举是叫人死，经义是叫人活。
So when Jesus said, "He who is without sin, let him throw the first stone," Jesus was upholding the law of Moses.
所以当耶稣说你们当中谁是没有罪的，可以先向他扔石头，耶稣是在持守摩西的律法。
But at the same time, he added something quite significant.
但是与此同时，他又加了一些很重要的东西。
He said, "He who is without sin."
他说了，你们当中没有罪的。
And we see in the response of those who came to accuse this poor woman that Jesus had hit a sore spot.
所以我们看到了那些指控这个妇人的那些人呢，他们就被主耶稣打到了软肋。
We see this in verse 9.
我们在第9节可以看到，
And those who heard it became convicted by their conscience. went out one by one, beginning with the oldest, even to the last.
他们听见这话，就从老到少，一个一个的都出去了，只剩下耶稣一人。
So they became convicted
他们被说服了，
by their conscience.
他们被自己的罪所克制了。
And so here we see the difference between what Jesus teaches and what the Old Testament law commanded.
所以这里就看到主耶稣的教导和这个旧约里面律法的教导是有些不同的。
Now the Pharisees claimed the law of Moses as their ultimate authority.
法利赛人就说这个摩西的律法是至高无上的权柄，
But under that law, everyone is guilty.
但是在那个律法之下，所有的人都是有罪的，
There's no one without sin.
没有人是没有罪的。
And so these scribes and these Pharisees had come to test Jesus.
所以这些文士和法利赛人呢，就来试探耶稣，
But Jesus put it all upside down
但是却被主耶稣给反转过来了。
and he tested them.
他试探了他们。
Picking up a stone would mean that you would claim that you are perfect.
捡起一块石头，就说明了你呢是没有罪的，
He who is without sin.
你们当中没有罪的。
Pick up the first stone and throw it.
捡起来这个地上的第一块石头，然后扔出去。
And their conscience convicted them.
他们自己的良心被发现了，
They were not without sin.
他们不是没有罪的，
They were not willing to say, I'm absolutely perfect.
他们也并没有想要说我是完全的、完美的。
So no one could say they were without sin.
没有人可以说我是没有罪的，
And neither can we.
我们也不可以这么说。
It was a brilliant answer from Jesus.
那个是从主耶稣来的非常棒的一个答案，
And one by one they left,
所以他们就一个一个的接着走了，
leaving the woman with Jesus.
只剩下那个妇人和耶稣。
Now the question is, what would Jesus do next?
但是问题就是说，耶稣下一步会做什么呢？
And he asked her a question,
他问了妇人一个问题，
and it's a very important one.
是个非常重要的问题。
Verse 10.
在第10节，
Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you?
妇人，那些人在哪里呢？没有人定你的罪吗？
She says there's no one.
妇人说没有人，
Now that's important.
这非常重要，
It's very important.
非常的重要。
Deuteronomy 17 verses 6 and 7 show us why.
在《申命记》的17章呢，6到7节是告诉我们为什么。
It says there, whoever is worthy of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. But he shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. The hands of the witnesses shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterwards the hands of all the people.
要凭2、3个人的口做见证，将那当死的人治死；不可凭1个人的口做见证，将他治死。见证人要先下手，然后众民也下手将他治死。这样就把那恶从你们中间除掉。
So the Lord gave us a careful process about how to go about this.
这个律法呢，给了我们一个就是很详细的这个程序，怎么样来处理这个事情。
Now tell me, was there anyone left who had witnessed her adultery?
但是那个时候有没有人留下来见证，或者是有人看见他的行淫呢？
Was anyone left?
有没有人留下来？
No.
没有吧？
Was Jesus a witness to her adultery?
那耶稣是看到他行淫了吗？
So could Jesus throw the first stone?
耶
No.
稣可以扔第一块石头吗？
So when Jesus says, neither do I condemn you, he was carefully following the instructions of the law of Moses.
所以当耶稣说我也不定你的罪，他其实是在小心的遵守摩西的律法，
He could do nothing else.
他做不了其他的事情，
He had to fulfill the law.
他要来完成律法所要求的事情。
Now that leaves us with a question.
这样呢，就带给来我们一个问题：
Did Jesus forgive this woman?
那耶稣有没有宽恕这个妇人呢？有没有人举手？
Did he forgive her?
他有没有宽恕这个妇人呢？
You see, the text does not mention forgiveness.
所以这个经文里面没有提到宽恕的事情，
He does not say, I forgive you your sin.
也没有说我宽恕了你的罪，
Instead, he says, sin no more.
他只是说不要再犯罪。
He's not condemning her by stoning her.
他没有透过扔石头来定他的罪。
I don't think this passage is about forgiveness.
我不觉得这个经文呢是关于宽恕的，
It's not about condoning adultery.
也不是要定奸淫行淫的罪，
I think it's about something else.
是关于其他的一些事情。
In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches a big principle.
在登山宝训的时候呢，耶稣教导我们一个很大的一个原则。
He said that he did not come to destroy the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them.
他说他来不是要废除律法和先知，而是要成全他们。
He fulfilled the law.
他要成全律法，
And by doing that, he brought out the fuller meaning of the law. He completes the picture.
所以呢，他成全律法是要借着来完善它，然后把这个更加的完美化。
You see, this case that the Pharisees and the scribes brought to Jesus was a test case.
这个文士和法利赛人带给耶稣的这个试探呢，是一个很完美的一个试探。
They came as accusers.
他们是来指控的，
They were pointing the finger.
他们将手指向了，
And they demanded punishment for her actions.
他们要求呢用惩罚、用手段。
And in doing so, they had come to test Jesus.
接着这么做呢，他们就来试探耶稣。
They were trying to catch him out. And instead, Jesus turned the whole thing around and tested them.
他们以此呢试图来找到主耶稣的错误，但是主耶稣呢却把整个的情形反转过来。
He who is without sin, throw the first stone.
你们当中没有罪的，可以先扔石头。
Now, the Apostle Paul reminds us in Galatians 6 and verse 1 that we are to restore one another if someone is overtaken in a trespass.
这个使徒保罗呢就在这个加拉太书里面就说，若有人
You
被
see,
过犯所胜，我们就当把他挽回过来。
you see, Jesus is about restoring our relationship with the Father in heaven.
耶稣呢是要把这个我们和神的关系重建的。
You know, it's easy to look at someone else and condemn that person for their sin.
我们很容易呢只单单看别人的这个罪，
But judgment starts with us.
但是呢论定呢是从我们自己开始。
Jesus is saying, get your own house in order first.
有一个老的说法，就是说你要先把自己的事儿解决清楚了。
So Jesus not only upheld the law of Moses, but he applied his own teaching on judging one another by saying, he who is without sin, cast the first stone.
耶稣呢不仅仅是持守了这个摩西的律法，而且他把自己的教导呢透过这种 方式，
He took the whole matter a step further.
他把这个教导呢又大大的彰显了。
He didn't deny the law,
他没有否定律法，
but showed us in his own teaching how much further he's asking us to go.
但是透过他的自己的教导呢，告诉我们我们需要再走多远。
In John chapter 12 and verse 47, Jesus said that he did not come to judge the world, but to save the world.
约翰福音的12章呢是这么说的，47节，我来不是要审判世人，乃是要拯救世人。
The Old Testament law condemns us,
这个旧约里面的律法呢，
but
定我们的罪，
Jesus came to save us,
但是耶稣来呢是拯救我们，
so that all of us might have a second chance.
所以我们所有的人都有第二次的机会。
So in the new covenant,
在新的约里面，
we rely upon what Jesus has done for us, not on what we can achieve in our own strength.
所以我们是依赖于耶稣为我们做了什么，而不是出于我们自己的能力所能做的。
Because if we try to live by the law, we will fail.
但如果我们是照律法所行的话，我们会失败的。
You know, a while ago, I was walking in the park near our home.
不久之前呢，我在这个家附近的一个公园散步。
It was at night and there was a full moon.
那天晚上呢有满月。
You know, when I see a full moon, it's beautiful.
当我看到这个满月的时候，真的是很漂亮。
The surface of the moon is clear and bright, and as you walk along, you can see everything.
这个月球的这个表面呢是非常的明亮，而且清晰的，它可以看到你前面，可以让你看到前面的路。
But then when the sun comes out in the morning, the moon seems to go pale.
但是当太阳从早晨的时候升起的时候，这个月亮就变得苍白了。
It looks grey and dim, and the sun, in contrast, is bright and dazzling.
所以它就变得暗淡无光了，和太阳比起来，它就完全的没有光彩了。
The moon is still there, but the sun is so much more bright and warm.
月亮呢还是在那儿，但是这个太阳呢是更加的明亮和温暖。
So the Old Testament law is like the moon.
所以旧约里面的律法呢，就像月亮一样。
In comparison to what Jesus teaches and who He is.
那和主耶稣所教导我们的他是谁相比呢？
Jesus is that bright and glorious light who can bring us back into a relationship with God the Father.
主耶稣就是那个明亮耀眼的光，能够让我们重新回到和神建立的关系这个层面上。
He has done for us what we could never do in our own strength.
他为我们做了我们自己所永远不能做的，用我们自己能力所能做的事儿。
He is the perfect Savior.
他是一个完美的救主。
The question is, have we trusted in Him?
问题就是我们对他有信靠吗？
Do we believe in Him?
我们对他有相信吗？
Do we listen to Him?
我们遵从他的话吗？
Do we follow Him?
我们跟随他的脚踪吗？
Let us pray.
我们一起来祷告。
Lord Jesus Christ,
亲爱的天父，
Son of the living God,
永生神的儿子，
have mercy upon us all.
愿你施恩与怜悯，
For we have broken the laws,
因为我们犯了罪，
and we cast ourselves upon you,
然后我们单单的仰望于你，
that you help us and raise us up,
然后帮助我们，
that you would guide us and protect us,
引领我们前面的路并保护我们，
and that you help us along the way.
让我们一路上都有你的保守。
For we ask it in your precious name.
以上的祷告是奉我主耶稣基督宝贵的名。
Amen.
Amen.